Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Zara and today I'm going to be doing a non-spoiler review of Empire of the Vampire by Jay Kristoff. Now, this is a book that I was adamant that I was not going to read it because I had heard some stuff about Jay Kristoff that I was not particularly keen on. I'd heard some stuff about him personally as an author, and then I'd also heard some issues with the Nevernight trilogy, which I think is the first trilogy that he wrote. And I just heard a lot of things about how his female characters were treated and how they were presented. And honestly, it just put me off reading any of his stuff. There's too many other books to read, and I haven't got time for that. That being said, I have had Empire of the Vampire in the back of my mind for a while, mainly because quite a few of my friends whose reading opinions I really rate, they all raved about it. And so I thought, okay, maybe if I find it at the library and there's a week where I just want to try something a little bit different, maybe I'll pick it up. And that's exactly what happened. So a couple of weeks back, I went to my local library. They had a copy of Empire of the Vampire. And I've been mood reading a lot lately, and I just wanted to pick it up. I was super curious about it, and so I ended up reading it over the course of about 5 days. Now, it's a pretty chunky book. It's about 800 pages, just under 800 pages if I remember correctly. It is a wild ride, and I have to say I really enjoyed it. It's one of those situations where I am happy to be wrong in this situation. There are definitely issues with the book, which I will go on to later on, but his character work and his ability to tell a story is pretty damn impressive, I have to say. So without further ado, let's jump into my review of Empire of the Vampire. So what did I love about this book? There was a lot of stuff that I really loved about this book. The first thing that I really loved was the way that the story is told. So we are told the story retrospectively from the perspective of Gabriel de Lyon. And Gabriel is a really great character, and I will come on to him more later on. I never really used to like that trope of the main character retelling the story to somebody else, because inevitably you kind of know that they make it out okay. But in this instance, it really worked for me because he was telling the story out of sync. He would go back to when he was younger, then he would go to a different timeline. And I just thought it worked. I thought it worked really well. I have to say this might actually be now one of my favorite tropes. I don't want to necessarily go ahead and say that fully because this is the first book that I've read like that in a while, but I really enjoyed it. The next thing that I really loved were the characters, specifically Gabriel de Lyon. His character is so good. I really like him. He's your typical kind of down on his luck warrior who's kind of been there and done that. Everybody holds him to a high esteem. Well, almost everybody does. And he's got this kind of really cutting, sarky humour. And I just really enjoyed his character. I think we see a lot of growth from when he's telling his story as a teenager, I think it is, up until the point where we get to the present day. And I'm really excited to see how his character develops as the series goes on. The other characters that I really liked Talon. Talon was hilarious. The comments that he would make to the initiates was just so funny. And I read him in a really cutting British accent. I don't know why, but it added to the hilarity, to be honest. Another thing that I really liked about the characters was the fact that we kind of had groups of characters and partnerships between characters, and I really liked those relationships. So one example of that was Dior and Gabe. I really love the trope of there being a man and a young woman or a girl. It's the reason why I love The Last of Us. I have to say there are a lot of parallels between this and The Last of Us, but I really love that dynamic because there's something paternal about it, and I feel like the young girl always gives it to the man. And I don't know, I really like that dynamic. It just works really well. It can be badly executed, but in this case it was executed really well. Another group that I really liked was the Brotherhood. There were a lot of quiet moments between the Brotherhood. So as an example, there was one scene in particular between Gabrielle, Talon, Greyhand and Aaron where they're sat around the campfire and they're just talking about life. I love those moments, and there were quite a lot of those moments in this book, so it catered for me perfectly. And another relationship that I really enjoyed was Gabrielle's relationship with Aaron, because that starts off very antagonistic, but then it develops into a real friendship. And I loved that. Hey guys, sorry, you probably noticed a shift in my camera. It's because my phone started to overheat again. So I'm going to try and get through this pretty quickly. So I did really love the animal companions as well, because I think they added a little bit of a different dimension to the story. And Phoebe the lion, Jezebel the horse, oh my gosh, great character. Absolutely loved her relationship with Gabrielle. The other thing that I really liked about this book is the fact that there is quite a lot of tension. There are quite a lot of reveals in this story, and I have to say only one or two of them did I guess, and the rest of them, they were pretty well done. And I feel like Kristoff probably laid clues from the start, but just because I wasn't paying attention, I wasn't able to capture them. So I'm really keen to do a reread of this when the second book comes out, because I'm sure there's definitely stuff that I've missed. The next thing that I really loved was the setting. So this is kind of your typical kind of medieval epic fantasy. I think there's quite a lot of Nordic inspiration as well, like Viking inspiration, that I really enjoyed. And I don't know, like the way that he does world building is so good, because a lot of this is set in like really cold conditions, and you could feel it. Like I felt cold as I was reading it, and bear in mind I was reading it during a heat wave in the UK, and I could feel the chill in the air. So I was super impressed that he was able to do that. And then the last thing that I really enjoyed, because I'm conscious that my phone is about to overheat again, was the thematic work that he did. I think there's a lot of commentary around loyalty and loyalty to the people that betray you. There's an interesting thread around like religious fundamentalism, about believing religion wholeheartedly to the point where maybe you shouldn't, and maybe you should start to question those things. That's definitely represented in the form of Chloe. And then the other kind of moral or ethical question that it brings up is whether it's ever worth killing one person to save a million people, or whether it's worth killing one person to save the lives of many. And that's what I meant when I was referring to the Last of Us comparison, because that is the dilemma that Joel is presented at the end of the first game. And I just thought it was really interestingly thrown into the mix, and I really liked it, and it made me think about what I would do if I was in that situation. And honestly, I would probably save the one, because murder is murder. All right, now onto the downsides. There are a few downsides. I will get onto my main downside in a second, but one thing is that there definitely needed to be a character list. There's a lot of characters in this world, and I had to, especially at the start, go back and forth to kind of figure out who was who. So character list would have been great, and I really hope we get one in the second book. The second thing is that there are some very silly parts to this book. This book is generally quite serious in tone, but there is some humour in it, which I really enjoyed. I did actually like most of the humour. But as an example, there's a bit where Gabrielle is about to be accosted by vampires who are trying to kill him, and then he gets an erection. And it's just like, come on, really? Like, really? The whole, like, danger makes me horny trope, I've talked about this before on my channel. I hate it. Why? Just why? Please, can somebody tell me why? And this brings me on to my third issue that I had with this book, and that is the representation of women in this book. Women in this book are often presented as being very, very young, either very young women, or they are just girls, so they're like children, and they are presented in an overly sexualized way. It is so unnecessary. This is why I stayed away from Nevernight. This is why I was potentially going to stay away from this book, and I ended up reading it. But it's just such a bizarre fixation on like young girls, young women, and presenting them in an overly sexualized way. It's just unacceptable, and I just don't know why people do it in the 21st century. Like, come on. Seriously, I thought we'd got over that. So that was my main gripe, and that was my main issue. And I have to say, as the book went on, it happened less and less. But the first half of the book, it happens too often that you can't not see it. And it's just really annoying, because come on, Jay Kristoff, like, come on. 21st century, mate. Let's get over this weird obsession that society has with young girls and young women and over-sexualizing them. Please? All right, great. So apart from that, I really enjoyed this book, and I gave it a 4.5 stars. I would have given it a 5 stars if that odd, bizarre thing with the treatment of women hadn't been so blatant and hadn't been there. Like, I definitely would have given it a 5 stars. I Was tempted to even knock off a whole star, but I couldn't in good faith because the story and the characters are that good. So kudos to him for that. Let's just dial down this weird obsession with girls and young women in the next book, please. Cool. Now this book is also a very quotable book, and so I'm going to read 6 of my favourite quotes. There's definitely more that I've missed out, but I'm just going to read these out. There's no misery so deep as one you face by yourself, no nights darker than ones you spend alone, but you can learn to live with any weight. Your scars grow thick enough, they become armour. If we spend all our lives in darkness, is it any wonder when darkness starts to live in us? Third one. Put a man in a room for 100 years with 1,000 books and he'll know a million truths. Put him in a room for a year with silence and he'll know himself. My mama knew herself, and there's a fearsome power in that, knowing exactly who you are and exactly what you're capable of. Most folks would call it arrogance, I suppose, but most folks are effing fools. I love that quote, it's so good. Couldn't agree more. Life is not a story you can tell, it's only a story you can live. The bright news is, you get to choose what kind yours will be. A story of horror or a story of courage. A story of indulgence or a story of duty. The story of a monster or the story of a man. What will your story be? All right, last one. This one's a little bit long, but I love this quote so much. It's in silence we know ourselves, vampire. It's in stillness we hear the questions that truly matter, scratching like baby birds on the eggshells of our eyes. Who am I? What do I want? What have I become? Truth is, the questions you hear in the quiet are always the most terrifying, because most people never take the time to listen to the answers. They dance and they sing and they fight and they F and they drown, filling their gullets with piss and their lungs with smoke and their heads with shit, so they never have to learn the truth of who the F they are. Put a man in a room for 100 years with 100 books and he'll know a million truths. Put him in a room for a year with silence and he'll know himself. Okay, so that was 5 quotes, not 6. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this review. My phone is about to overheat again, so I'm going to stop here. Let me know if you've read this book and let me know what were your favourite parts. And I will see you guys down in the comments. Thanks for watching, folks. Stay safe, take care, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.